My eyes snapped open under fluorescent light, and the first voice I heard wasn't a nurse. It was my mother's, sharp through the phone speaker in the ambulance. "Is she dead?" she asked. The paramedic said, "Not yet." My mother exhaled like that was an inconvenience. "Then it can wait. Megan is having a crisis." I stared at the ceiling of the moving rig, trying to breathe without screaming. Every inhale felt like broken glass. I tasted metal. Someone kept saying my name. Emily Carter, 34, trauma surgeon. Houston, stay with us. I tried to lift my hand. It wouldn't obey. I tried to ask for my daughter. My mouth was dry, and the words stuck. The medic leaned closer. "Your parents are on their way?" He didn't know what that question did to me, because in that moment I realized something clean and ugly. They were willing to let my daughter lose her mother. If you've ever had family choose someone else when you were bleeding, tell me in the comments. I'm still trying to understand how they said it so easily. I had just come off a 16-hour shift. 3 trauma patients back to back. No drama in the retelling. Just hands moving, decisions made, blood, pressure, sutures, the steady work that keeps people here. When I finally left the hospital, my body was running on fumes and habit. I got into my car and pointed it toward home. I remember the parking garage. I remember the freeway lights. And then I remember nothing. Later, they told me I passed out behind the wheel. I didn't die in that moment, but I came close enough that it changed the way time sounded. I woke up fully when the pain hit. It was everywhere, but it had a center, deep in my chest. The medic said 3 ribs were broken. He said there was a pneumothorax. He said internal bleeding. His voice was calm like it always is when things are bad. I tried to picture Lily's face. She was 8. She still left the hallway light on when she slept. She still reached for my hand in a crowd. She still believed, without thinking, that I would always come back. The medic called the hospital ahead. He called my parents again. I heard him say they were 25 minutes away. My mother didn't ask where I was. She didn't ask if I could breathe. She asked again, "Is she dying?" When she heard not yet, she said, "Okay, we're with Megan." Megan, my sister. 30-something and still treated like the fragile center of the universe. The crisis was a traffic ticket. $385 for running a red light. I learned that later, in pieces. In the moment, all I knew was that my parents had been reached, and they had chosen not to come. For 90 minutes, I was bleeding inside while nurses and administrators called them. 10 calls, the hospital told me. 10 chances to turn the car around, to get in their own car, to show up. They stayed at a diner, calming Megan down, because she was upset. I lay on a gurney as they rolled me through doors, and I watched ceiling tiles slide by like slow clouds. Someone taped my wedding ring-sized hospital band around my wrist. I heard the word "or," and then the world blurred at the edges. 3 hours after the first call, my parents arrived. Not in the ambulance. Not when the doctors were still deciding how bad the bleeding was. They arrived when I was already being taken to surgery. The first thing they asked wasn't whether I would live. They asked if the car was covered by insurance. I heard that later, too. A nurse told me, her face tight, because she couldn't pretend it was normal. When I woke in the ICU, tubes and beeps around me, my mother was there, sitting stiff in a chair like she was waiting for service. My father stood behind her, silent as always, eyes fixed on the floor. I looked at them and felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Not anger yet, just recognition. This wasn't new. It was built, layer by layer. 7 years of being the responsible one. 7 years of being told, every time I hesitated, that it was for the family, and my daughter had been watching me disappear into it. By the time the nurse adjusted my oxygen, I could finally speak. My voice was thin. "Where were you?" I asked. My mother's face hardened. "Megan needed us," she said. Like that ended the conversation. My father didn't correct her. In my chest, the pain flared again, not just from the ribs, from the fact that even now, even here, they acted like I was asking for too much. I turned my head toward the window because I couldn't look at them. I was still alive. And somehow, that felt like the least important fact in the room. A nurse asked who should be updated if something changed. I gave Lily's name first, then the sitter's number. My throat tightened when I said it. My child was at home, and the people who made me weren't acting like that mattered. My mother leaned forward and acted as if my fear was the only problem. She wanted comfort, not accountability. I reminded her they hadn't come when called. She blamed Megan again, as if a ticket justified it still. My father looked up, but he didn't speak. Silence was his way of staying on everyone's good side. I thought about Lily's next school award, her next birthday, her next question. I thought about what I was teaching her every time I sent money, canceled plans, and called it love. I didn't have the strength to fight yet, but I had enough to remember every word. If this is hitting close to home, stay with me. The part they did in the ICU was worse than the crash. In the days that followed, the staff filled in what my foggy memory couldn't hold. The hospital had called my parents 10 times while my internal bleeding was worsening. They were 25 minutes away. They did not come. They stayed at a diner to comfort Megan. I lay in an ICU bed with taped ribs and a tube doing part of my breathing, and I kept replaying that choice. Not because it was shocking, because it was familiar. For 7 years, my parents had trained me to accept being second. It started with a loan. They persuaded me to co-sign one for $186,000. They promised it would be temporary. They promised they would pay. I signed because I was busy, because I was tired, and because I didn't want to be the daughter who said no. They never paid. Over time, the gaps became my responsibility. I covered more than $43,000 in payments they did not make. Each month, I told myself it was safer to pay than to deal with the consequences. Each month, my parents treated my fear as proof that I should keep doing it. On top of that, they convinced me to send $1,200 every month into what they called a family fund. It sounded like support. It sounded normal. Over 7 years, it added up to more than $100,000. When I finally added the total, the number sat on the page like a bruise. All that time, Lily was growing up beside me. She was 8 when I crashed. She had already learned to read my exhaustion. She had watched me cancel plans because my parents needed money for Megan. She had watched me leave the house tired and come back tired and still answer my phone when it rang. If you've ever been told you're selfish for wanting your own life, say it in the comments. I used to think my silence was maturity. Now I see what it really taught my child. Lily asked questions I couldn't dodge forever. She asked why her grandparents didn't come when I was honored at work, but they always appeared when Megan needed something. She asked it like a child trying to understand a pattern adults kept denying. I told her they were busy, and the lie sat between us. Back in the ICU, my mother acted as if Megan's ticket was an emergency and my injuries were an inconvenience. My father stayed quiet, letting her speak for both of them. The staff moved around my bed with careful hands, and I watched my parents look everywhere except my face. Then I noticed my mother on her phone. She was moving money out of the emergency account I had set up for moments like this. She used it to pay Megan's $385 ticket while I was still in critical care. When I reacted, they called me selfish and said it was for the family. That phrase used to stop me. It used to make me swallow everything and keep the peace. This time, I looked at the ceiling and thought of Lily. I thought of the next time she would need me. I thought of the lesson she would carry if I let this happen in front of her, even from a hospital bed. I didn't raise my voice. I told them to leave my room. My mother froze as if she couldn't believe I had said it. My father looked shocked, then looked away. The nurse paused, waiting to see if I would take it back. I didn't. They walked out with stiff faces, as if they were the ones who had been wounded. And for the first time in 34 years, the air around me felt mine. The next thing I did wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. Recovery gave me too much time to think. Between rounds, I listened to monitors and footsteps and the low conversations of nurses in the hallway. I kept hearing my mother's first question in the ambulance. I kept seeing my father's silence. I kept wondering how many times I had accepted being ignored and called it love. I thought about my own childhood, how I learned to perform competence so nobody would worry about me, and how that made it easy to forget I had needs. I thought about how often I had sent money with a tight stomach, and then smiled on the phone so my mother wouldn't accuse me of having an attitude. Lily visited once I was stable enough. She climbed into the chair beside my bed and held my hand without speaking much. Her eyes kept searching my face, as if she was counting the seconds I was still here. I promised her I wasn't going anywhere. Then I realized promises don't protect children. Choices do. When my parents weren't in the room, I asked the staff what they remembered. I didn't ask for opinions. I asked what was said when they called. I asked how many times they tried. I asked who documented it. I learned the difference between pain and proof. By the time I went home, I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for clarity. Clarity meant I could finally stop negotiating with people who only loved me when I paid them. I asked for records. I asked for facts. I asked for what could be printed and saved, because I had learned how quickly my family rewrote history. When I was discharged, I went home to Lily with bruises under my skin and a new exhaustion. She hugged me carefully. I told her I was going to be okay. That night I pulled bank statements. I pulled the loan contract. I pulled messages where my parents demanded money. I saved the posts they used to praise Megan online. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was building a boundary they couldn't talk their way through. I knew the next month would force them to hear what they refused to hear. A month after the crash, my ribs still complained when I climbed stairs. I went back to work because trauma doesn't pause, so you can process your own life. But I was different. Every time my phone buzzed, my body expected a demand. Every time I opened my banking app, I remembered my mother taking money from my emergency account while I lay in the ICU. If you're thinking about cutting off family support and you're scared, stay with me. I was scared too, and I still moved forward. I built my file the way I build a case in the operating room, one clean step at a time. I printed the loan agreement for $186,000 with my name on it. I highlighted each payment I had made on their behalf, more than $43,000. I pulled the record of the monthly transfers, $1,200 a month, for 7 years, over $100,000. Then I added what happened the night I almost died. I saved the hospital call log, 10 missed and ignored calls in the window when my internal bleeding was getting worse. I saved the notes showing what staff said when they reached my parents. I saved the record of the transfer out of my emergency account in the ICU used to pay Megan's $385 ticket. I also saved the way my parents presented the family online, the posts that praised Megan, the polished picture they offered the world while privately leaning on me. I wasn't collecting this to be cruel. I was collecting it because Lily was watching. She was 8, and she had grown up with a mother who canceled plans and called it responsibility. She had watched me run on exhaustion and still pick up the phone when my parents needed money for Megan. She had learned to lower her own expectations because I was always helping. If you've ever realized your child is learning your survival habits, tell me. That was the moment that finally scared me more than my parents. The hospital gala was coming up, a fundraiser and an awards night. More than 200 people in one room, including the coworkers who had tried to reach my parents when I was crashing. I was scheduled to speak. That part was normal. What wasn't normal was what I was going to show. I told a few trusted colleagues what had happened, in plain words. I didn't ask them to take sides. I asked one question. Had they called my parents that night, and what response did they get? Their answers matched the records. They said they pleaded for my parents to come. They said my parents refused because Megan's situation mattered more. Hearing it from people who were there removed the last excuse I kept trying to give my family. It wasn't confusion. It was a decision. I had spent years treating my parents like a second job. I scheduled my life around their emergencies. I answered late-night calls. I moved money faster than I moved my own needs. I told myself it was temporary, just until things stabilized, just until Megan got it together. Things never stabilized. The requests simply became normal. Once I stopped, My body reacted like I had broken a rule. I felt guilty in the quiet moments, like I had forgotten an appointment. I kept checking my phone. I kept waiting for my mother's voice to push past my boundaries. Even without her speaking, I could hear her disappointment. That's when I understood how deep the training went. They didn't need to control me in person. I carried it for them. So I replaced habit with procedure. I called the bank and asked what it takes to remove my name from a co-signed loan. I asked what happens when payments stop. I asked what documentation they need. The answers were direct. The process had steps. The steps had dates. There was no room for my mother's emotions in it. That was a relief. I also took control of my accounts. I changed access. I reviewed every automatic transfer. I closed the path my parents had used to reach my money without asking. I made it boring and secure, the way I make a surgical plan. At home, I started giving Lily small, steady proof that our life could be calm. We ate dinner without interruptions. We went to bed without me staring at my phone. We made plans I didn't cancel. She didn't celebrate it. She just relaxed into it. And the more she relaxed, the clearer it became that my old version of peace had never been peace. It had been compliance. The gala was my line in the sand, not because I wanted revenge, because I needed a public boundary my parents couldn't quietly undo. If I said it out loud, in front of witnesses, the story couldn't be rewritten later. That was the point. I wanted Lily to remember that her mother chose truth, even when it cost comfort. At home, Lily sat beside me while I organized papers. She didn't understand the numbers, but she understood the mood. She brought me water without being asked. She watched me choose quiet over rushing to fix my parents' problems. I stopped sending money before the gala. I stopped covering payments. I stopped feeding the machine. I didn't announce it. I simply stopped. My parents reached for the old phrase again, the one they used whenever I hesitated. For the family. It didn't work. The night before the gala, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my hands steady. I rehearsed what I would say. Not to sound dramatic, to sound clear. Clarity is what manipulation can't survive. I didn't know what my parents would do when the truth became public. I didn't know how loud the backlash would get, but I knew one thing. I was not going to let Lily grow up thinking love means erasing yourself to keep peace. The gala room was bright and polished in that expensive way. Linen tablecloths, glassware catching the light, people who knew how to smile through discomfort. I stood backstage with my ribs still tender under my dress. My lungs were better, but I could still feel the night of the crash in every deep breath. I wasn't afraid of speaking. I was bracing for what would happen after. When my name was announced, the applause came on cue. I walked to the podium and looked out over more than 200 faces. Colleagues, administrators, donors, people who had watched me do my job when life was messy. I didn't start with feelings. I started with facts. I introduced myself and reminded the room what I did for a living. Then I told them what happened after a 16-hour shift, on the drive home, when my body finally shut down. I told them I woke up in an ambulance with 3 broken ribs, a pneumothorax, and internal bleeding. I paused to breathe, because the truth still lived in my chest. Then I clicked the remote. On the screen behind me, the hospital call log appeared. 10 calls, timestamps, my parents' numbers. Missed, missed, missed. I said what the timeline showed. 90 minutes of internal bleeding while the hospital called my parents 10 times. A 25-minute drive. Another click. My mother's words appeared. Is she dead? Then it can wait. Megan is having a crisis. The air in the room changed. It wasn't loud. It was a shift in oxygen. Another click. The crisis amount. $385. A traffic ticket for running a red light. I didn't insult Megan. I didn't call her names. I said the number and let adults do the math. Then I said the sentence I had practiced. They chose $385 over my life. I didn't stand there alone. My colleagues had lived that night with me. More than one of them had called my parents and been turned away. Later, they confirmed it openly, in front of that room. They confirmed they begged my parents to come. They confirmed they were refused because Megan needed more. That confirmation mattered. Not because I needed backup to be believed, because my parents had trained me to doubt my own memory. I clicked again. Bank statements. The loan agreement. $186,000 co-signed. Payment history highlighted. Over $43,000 I had paid for them. Then the monthly transfers. $1,200 a month. 7 years. Over $100,000. I didn't call it love. I didn't call it generosity. I called it what it looked like on paper. I stated the total plainly. More than $160,000 between the loan they never paid and the monthly fund they demanded. I let the number sit. Then I showed the ICU transfer. My mother pulling from the emergency account I created while I was still in critical care to pay Megan's ticket. The room stayed quiet. People were reading. People were calculating. People were realizing that none of this had been a misunderstanding. I steadied my hands on the podium. I said I was done. Effective immediately. I was ending financial support. I was closing the family account. I was removing my name from the loan. I didn't ask permission. I announced a boundary. When I stepped away from the microphone, my legs felt light. My heart felt heavy. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. Outside, the humid Houston air hit my face like a reset. My ribs hurt. My hands shook. Adrenaline fades, and then you're left with what you actually did. My phone lit up as I walked to my car. I didn't answer. I went home to Lily. She was asleep. I watched her chest rise and fall and thought about the night I had almost not come back to that room. Over the next few days, the practical part began. I met with the bank and started the process to remove my name from the loan. I closed the account they had used as a family fund. I stopped the automatic transfers. I kept copies of everything, because I had learned what my parents did when they didn't like the truth. Once the bank had the paperwork, the responsibility shifted, not as punishment, as reality. A few weeks later, the bank moved the full debt back onto my parents, and their house went up for sale. I didn't celebrate. I just noticed how fast for the family disappeared when the bill arrived in writing. In the days after, I kept my world small. Home, work, Lily. I didn't chase conversations. I didn't try to manage anyone's feelings about what I had done. For years, that had been my job in my family, and it had almost cost me my life. The hospital didn't turn it into gossip the way I feared. People were too busy saving patients. But a few quiet moments happened. A coworker squeezed my shoulder in a hallway. A nurse handed me water and said she was glad I'd spoken. No big speeches, just small acknowledgments that I wasn't crazy for expecting someone to show up. My parents never asked what they could do to repair it. They kept trying to talk around it. They wanted me back in the role of the dependable daughter, the one who pays and stays quiet. I could feel that pull in my chest, like a reflex. So I kept returning to the same evidence. 10 calls, 90 minutes, 25 minutes away. The ICU transfer, the loan, the monthly fund. Facts don't bend. And that's why I put them on a screen. Lily deserved facts too, one day. If you're still here, stay for the last part today. The consequences came quickly, and Lily finally got the mother she deserved. A few weeks after the gala, the bank did what banks do. Once my name was removed and the paperwork was in place, the full weight of that $186,000 loan stopped leaning on me. It leaned on them. Their house went up for sale soon after. In a different season of my life, that would have felt like a victory. It didn't. It felt like gravity returning to normal. If you've ever wondered whether you're allowed to choose your child over the people who raised you, tell me. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for honesty. My parents kept reaching out. The messages came in waves. Some sounded offended. Some sounded wounded. None of them faced the facts I had put on that screen. They circled the same idea they always used. For the family. That phrase used to hook me. It used to make me question myself. It used to make me hand over money before I even asked what it was for. Now it sounded like what it was. A lever. I didn't argue with them. I didn't write essays. I didn't explain the call log. 200 people had already seen it. 10 missed calls while I was bleeding internally. A 25-minute drive they chose not to take. A $385 ticket they treated like an emergency. My mother taking money from the emergency account I created while I was still in the ICU. The story was already told, so I let the boundary stand. No more $1,200 a month. No more covering their loan. No more access to my accounts. No more private meetings where I would be talked down until I gave in. The first month felt strange, not because I missed giving, because my body didn't know how to live without the constant pressure of the next request. I kept waiting for my phone to ring at dinner. I kept checking my banking app like I would see money disappear on its own. I kept bracing for the feeling of being bad. Then nothing happened. My paycheck stayed where it belonged, in my home, with my child. That didn't make me rich. It made me stable. It meant groceries without anxiety. It meant school supplies without a second thought. It meant Lily could ask for a field trip fee, and I could say yes without doing math in my head. It meant I could rest. And resting is not laziness, it's recovery. Lily had grown up watching me run on fumes, watching me cancel plans because I was helping, watching me come home drained and still say, it was fine. It wasn't fine. She had asked me before why her grandparents missed my award ceremony, but always appeared when Megan needed something. She asked it like a child, trying to understand a pattern adults kept denying. I had lied to her then. I told her they were busy. After the crash, and after the ICU, and after the gala, I stopped lying. Not by telling her every adult detail, by changing what she witnessed. One night, Lily asked if we were going to see them. She asked it softly, like she was checking the weather. I told her we would spend time with people who treated us with care. That was all she needed. Kids don't need speeches. They need consistency. So I took the money that had been leaving my account every month and I opened a college fund for Lily. I didn't call it a statement. I didn't post it online. I just did it quietly, the way I used to pay my parents quietly. But this time, it wasn't to keep peace. It was to build her future. The first deposit felt like relief moving through my body, like oxygen returning after being held too long. It was the same discipline I had used for 7 years, aimed at the right person. At the hospital, I kept working. I kept saving strangers on operating tables. I kept doing the job I trained for, but I stopped sacrificing my own life on the side. After the gala, people treated me carefully for a few days. Not like I was fragile, like they respected what it costs to tell the truth about your own family. A few coworkers said they were glad I was alive. I thanked them and kept moving. I didn't want my pain to become office gossip. The harder part was going home and being alone with my thoughts. The crash had taken my strength for a while. I couldn't lift Lily the way I used to. I couldn't drive long distances at first. I had to accept help, and that was new for me. Lily adjusted faster than I did. She brought me water without being asked. She reminded me to sit down. She watched me choose rest over guilt, and she didn't question it. She looked calmer as the weeks passed, like her body could finally trust that I wasn't going to vanish because someone else wanted my attention. I also started noticing how much space my parents used to take up in my head. Even when they weren't in the room, I heard their expectations. I heard the old warning that I would be selfish. I heard the pressure to make things easy for them. Each time that voice rose, I went back to the call log in my mind. 10 calls, 90 minutes, 25 minutes away. That record became my anchor, not to punish them, to steady myself. I still have moments where grief hits me in strange places. When I see other families showing up for each other without negotiation. When I hear the word mom in a hallway and feel my chest tighten, I grieve the parents I wanted. I don't grieve the control, because the night I almost died taught me something medicine can't teach. Family is who shows up when you're bleeding, not who says for the family while they watch you disappear.